اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله الله عليه. صلوا على النور أحمد الله نور المنازل يا محمد يا من خلق من نور ربه الله يا من سمي قبل يولد. صلوا على النور أحمد الله نور المنازل يا محمد يا من خلق من نور ربه الله يا من سمي قبل يولد. أهلا وسهلا بحبي الله يا من سكن وسط قلبي وفي الهوى صار حسبي الله. هذه مقادير ربي ما حجب لي قط مثلي أنا العقايق في أهلي وقد عثرت بجهلي الله يا ريح الأحباب حبي. صلوا على النور أحمد الله نور المنازل يا محمد يا من خلق من نور ربه الله يا من سمي قبل يولد يا من نظر عرض قتبه قد شم ريح المحبة من لم يشم المحبة الله فليس له قط طبي. قلبي معلق معهم الله في أرضهم وسماهم وليس عندي كما هم الله عرج بهم يوم غبي. صلوا على النور أحمد الله نور المنازل يا محمد يا من خلق من نور ربه الله يا من سمي قبل يولد. كم لي أقلب خصالي هيا ما هوى الليالي البر والبحر مالي الله وزرعهم منه حبي. يا ليت لي عين تنظر الله أو عندهم كنت أحضر نرعى الجميل ثم نشكر الله ونام راعي ملبي صلوا على النور أحمد الله نور المنازل يا محمد يا من خلق من نور ربي الله يا من سمي قبل يولد اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Subhanallah, the way we experience time is that things come and they go. It's like this past Ramadan seems to be the quickest Ramadan to ever have passed. Just as you're starting, next thing you know that it's Eid. Just as you're starting the retreat, next thing you know, you're in the final session on Sunday. The hope is that we've done what we've done this weekend for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sincerely. And one of the meanings of the words of Allah ta'ala, kullu shayin halikun illa wajha. Everything is halik, perishing. Everything is perishing illa wajha, except his countenance subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the meanings of that is that all of our deeds are worthless except that which was done solely for the sake of Allah Ta'ala. It's not halik. It will remain, in other words. Anything done for the sake of Allah Ta'ala will remain. And remain in the sense of we'll get the benefit of those acts not only in the hereafter, in this world. And this is the blessing of doing good, is that good brings about more good here in this world, let alone in the hereafter. And this is the way that we experience the various khawatir and thoughts that we have. Anytime that we respond to a thought from the angels, is that it leads to more thoughts of other angels. Anytime that we respond to a thought of shaitan, is that it leads us to other thoughts coming from the host of shaitan, wa'adhu billah. And so this is the nature of good and evil, is that doing good brings about more good, doing evil brings about more evil, wa'adhu billahi ta'ala. And the more that we do evil, the harder it is then to do good. The more in that you do good, the easier it is to do then more good, and so forth and so on. And then in general, though, the only caveat there is that it's much easier to fall down than to climb up. To fall down, you don't put energy in. This is the nature of how we experience the world, gravity. And the word for falling, one of them at least, you have saqat, of course, in Arabic, but hawa, Yahweh, is a word for falling. This is why one of the descending levels, of hell is al-hawiyah. And that hawa Yahweh is to fall. And that one of the greatest ways that human beings fall and they falter is because of their hawa, the desires it is that we have, and it manifests in us choosing the world in the moment over the eternal hereafter. For what? For a desire that we want to be gratified. And it's so easy. You have something right before you, you fall short and you just do it because you wanted to do it, whatever it is. And then what remains is remorse. And even that desire, you experience it in the moment, but then it's done, it's gone. And all that remains is regret. You don't have any that positive feeling, and on the contrary, it's that regret that takes place after. And this is why Allah Ta'ala has given us an aql, an intellect, in order that we don't fall into that. And that This is what studying this type of knowledge does, is that it strengthens us. It strengthens our aql, it strengthens our qalb, our intellect and our heart, and is a means for tathbeet, making us firm upon the sirat al-mustaqim, the straight path, until we meet Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And this is the thing, is when it comes to the spiritual path, the path of taqwa, there is no time off. Or rather, you could say that when it comes to spiritual work, there is no that time off. In other words, you can't just say, okay, I'm going to have taqwa 6 days of the week, and then I'm just going to take a day off from taqwa. You can take a day off from outward work. You have to take time off from work. But taqwa, you can't just say, okay, I'm going to be good, and then just take a little bit of time off here, do whatever I want, I'm going to come back to being good. We don't have this concept of, is it the Amish deprives, where they, I don't know what it's called, but at a certain point, they let their children experience the world, and then they make a decision whether they're going to come back to the community or not, and then commit for the rest of their life. Yani, for us, it doesn't work like that. Yes, as a parent, you have to guide your children to what's best, and you have to deal with them in a wise way to give them proper direction. And sometimes they do go off the deep end and do things they shouldn't do, but we don't let them do that so that they can then figure out what it is they want to do in their life. You try your best to preserve their fitrah from the time that they're young. So this knowledge is extremely valuable, very precious, and you will find in the grave, when we're all going to be in the grave, that the greatest time that you would have spent is studying the works of Imam al Ghazali. And this is not hyperbole. They've said, the people of the past, لو بعث الله الموتى لما أوصى الأحياء إلا بما في الإحياء. So were Allah Ta'ala to have resurrected the mota, the deceased, they would not have advised the ahya, the living, except that which is in the ihya, is in the revival. And this is in a very real way, because this is the most essential knowledge that you and I need, and that, yes, there's other things that you might need to study. You might want to go in a little bit deeper than what that mentions here in terms of aqidah. You might need to go a little bit deeper in terms of some of the chapters of fiqh that you need to study. There might be a couple other things that you need here and there, but for the most part, this book is comprehensive. It gives you what it is that you need to know, and then you can pick up here and there that kind of an on-the-job training type sense, other things that you need by asking good questions to people who can answer them. So we did not finish the last bullet points from yesterday about the etiquettes of travel. I'm going to quickly do that before moving on to this last part, in part 2 of the outward knowledge associated with travel. So Yusuf just covered that the most important legal dispensations, the rukhas, the things that we need to know that we do during the travel, that the Shariat, the lawgiver, has given us, given that travel is difficult, that the Sharia expands from the blessing of Allah Ta'ala, and there's concessions and dispensations that we can take as a result. So the two that we didn't take were, the first is returning from the travel. So there are a series of etiquettes that we discussed that while traveling, and then someone's going to return from the travel. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that when he would return to his blessed city of Medina Munawwara, there was a supplication that he would make. Allahumma ij'al lana biha qararan wa rizqan hasana. Again, these just simply need to be memorized, and if someone wants to get a copy of the Khulasatul Madad, it has a summary of the most important invocations that we need to say when we travel and when we return. And there's an app that has these for you as well, and there's even one that has them translated. And then he says, ثُمَّ لِيُرْسَلْ إِلَى أَهْلِ مَنْ يُبَشِّرُهُ بِقُدُومِهِ. So this was the sunnah, is that the Prophet ﷺ would alight that a short distance from Medina, then he would send someone to let them know that they were going to arrive soon. And of course, this is in a pre-modern sense, before communication, is that we should be in touch with family members, our spouse, when you're returning, and they should know the time that we are returning. And so that it's actually disliked that to return to your family at night without them knowing. It's a type of prohibition, and it's a prohibition that's disliked. And that someone might not be ready for someone coming. And there might be certain things that they're planning to do that they would have preferred to get ready before someone returns. And so here they mention night because but it also relates to, right, our purposes is that the main thing is that you communicate with the place that you're going, whether it's to a friend's house, whether it's that you're staying with the family, whether you're coming back to your own house, you communicate to them the time of your arrival ahead of time. And in the pre-modern world, they would have actually sent people to let them know so that they could be prepared in khalas. And these are just basic common decency and common respect. And there's just certain things that you would normally do, is that someone might need to clean themselves up or need to take a bath or something of this nature that's even as simple and as mundane as that, that they might not have had time to do, and that this is proper etiquette. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he returned from the travel, the first thing that he would do is he would enter into the masjid and pray 2 rak'ahs. Then he would enter into his home. And his home was attached to the masjid sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. If someone has a masjid that close, like some of our brothers here from Buffalo, mashallah, City Tamer's house, mashallah, is connected to the masjid, it's much easier for him to return from his travel, pray 2 rak'ahs in the Buffalo Jami Masjid, and then go to his home. If it's facilitated, khair. Hafiz, Allah as well, because he lives upstairs. If that's facilitated, khair. If not, then that it's good to pray 2 rak'ahs at your home. And then that our Prophet used to say, Tawban, Tawban, li Rabbina, Oban la yughadir aynina, Hoban. And then he says, وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ يَحْمِلْ أَهْلِ بَيْتِهِ وَأَلِيَقَرْبِ تُحْفَةً مِنْ مَطْعُمٍ وَغَيْرِهِ. That if you've traveled and you've come home, you should bring a gift of some sort. Either something to eat, like mat'um, or that something else that is that you know that they would like. عَلَى قَدْرِ إِمْكَانِهِ. And to the extent that you have your ability. And you might, depending upon that how long you've been gone and so forth and so on, there's different factors, what you were able to carry, there's all different types of considerations, but whatever it is, even something. And that he says here, he quotes, there's a hadith that says, إِذَا قَدِمَ أَحَدُكُم مِّن سَفَرٍ فَلْيُهْدِ إِلَى أَهْلِهِ وَلْيُطْرِفْهُمْ وَلَوْ كَانَتْ حِجَارَةً. Some of you that comes back from a travel, that they should give a gift to, that he should give a gift to his family, and that give them something new, even if it be a stone. Yani something, even if it's just a stone, it should be something. And think about what that does, that engenders love, and that you've been thinking about them and so forth. And I say this, and I'm probably the worst gift giver of all, that you ask my family, much of my shopping's in the duty-free area, right, in the airports. So I need to learn from this myself. Sorry, Abu Bakr. Right. But I need to take this to heart and to learn this as well. I'm a terrible shopper. But khair, inshallah. وَكَأَنَّ هَذَا مُبَالَغَةٌ فِي الْإِسْتِحْدَاثِ عَلَى هَذِهِ الْمَكْرُمَةِ. Right, this is, our Prophet saying this is, he's indicating that this is something we really should be doing. No. So then the last bit here is the bit on the inward etiquettes. And that the first thing he says, وَجُمْلَةُ, to summarize it, أَلَّا يُسَافِرَ إِلَّا إِذَا كَانَ زِيَادَةُ دِينِهِ فِي السَّفَرِ. But we should only travel if it's going to strengthen our deen. We should only travel if it's good for our deen. That's the number one principle. Is it so from that perspective, then it actually is very easy. You don't have to start thinking about all the divisions. Is this is this permissible? Is this recommended? Right? It's very simple. Is it good for your deen, or is it not good for your deen? If it's good for your deen, travel and make the right intentions. If it's not good for your deen, khalas, don't travel. So he says, and again, tying this to the science of the path to the hereafter. Only travel if it's good for your deen. And then he says, وَيَنْوِي فِي دُخُولِ كُلِّ بَلْدَةٍ أَنْ يَرَى شُيُوخَهَا. You should intend to visit the scholars in every place it is that you go, or the people of knowledge, or the people of da'wah, or people are known for their piety. ويجتهد أن يستفيد من كل واحد أدبا أو كلمة لينتفع بها. And you should strive to benefit from anyone that he can, that some form of adab, manners, a character trait, or a word, a wisdom, or something of this nature that he can benefit from. لا ليحكي ذلك ويظهر أنه لقي المشايخ. Not so that he can tell people about it and be like, oh, look who I've been around. And some people, unfortunately, that they almost flaunt where they've been and what they've done and who they have met and so forth. Not for that reason. Is that we do it for other people to benefit, for us to benefit, for other people to benefit, not to show off. And so this is really important. And alhamdulillah, there was probably a time in the United States USA, and maybe to some degree still, many places that you go, it's like, who do I visit? But this is really changing. And different places in Canada, for those from Canada, places here in the US, a good percentage of the places that you go, that you'll find good people. And this is the way of the people of Allah, is to make themselves available to people that want to visit them for Allah Ta'ala's sake. And this might not be too customary for us, but this needs to change. And unfortunately, there's just something about the society in which we live and hospitality, even down to the type of homes that we live in. The homes in the Muslim world, and it's changing, but traditionally the homes were made for diyafa and hospitality. They were built with hospitality in mind. And nowadays you buy a 3,500 square foot home in the United States of America, and then you have like a tiny little room that can fit like 5 people, right? When you enter into the Ishad, what is that? That's very strange to traditional people. And then now the new floor plan is just to have the kitchen open, right? And like everything else just like nice and open. So the homes aren't compartmentalized. And so your family's right there and your guests are right here. Whereas traditionally, like there was a place separate from the house where you could actually freshen up, use the washroom, wash your hands without having to mix with the family. The family had their private quarters. The women could be with the women, the men could be with the men, and that you could actually host guests regularly, easily, without takalluf. So unfortunately, that there's restraints that on the time in which we live, and even that some of the nicest houses you walk in, boom, the stairs right there upstairs. So someone can't even go upstairs in their own house. It's right by the front door. These things are strange to traditional people who actually think about these things. Anyhow, that it is what it is. We do make we make do with what we have. But in general, this is a good thing. So someone should ask if they know they're going to, there's some people that are from Seattle. Okay, that who's in Seattle that I can visit? Wow, there's actually quite a few people in Seattle that are people of knowledge, that pious people, that you can get benefit greatly from visiting. And you might not be able to visit everyone, but visit who you can. Some people here from the Tri-City, the Raleigh-Durham area, right? Who's there? Who can I go visit there? There's definitely people you can go visit there that you could benefit from greatly. Wherever you go, that ask, right? You're going to go to Chicago Sharif, right? Ask who are there's tons of people in Chicago that you could visit there's a lot of people that are you'll benefit greatly from. And then even in some of the smaller cities. So ask people that you know that are from those, who can I visit there? And so forth and so on. And that this is a good thing to do. And if they're not people of knowledge or not people of da'wah or scholars, is that there could be good people there. Oh, visit so-and-so. And it doesn't have to be with takalluf. You don't have to stay for 3 hours. It doesn't have to be for a meal. It could just literally be for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And you'll find that you benefit immensely from this. And try to have the conversation be good conversation. Yes, it's always good to begin with asking how everyone is, checking on everyone, asking about their state, their family, so forth, right then. that ask good questions and that have good conversation. You'll be surprised how much you can benefit from these visits. This is one of the great sunnahs that needs to be revived in our time. And then he says here, in terms of these inward etiquettes, one of them as well, even though it's outward, you're doing something, وَلَا يُهْمِلْ فِي سَفَرِ زِيَارَةَ قُبُورِ الصَّالِحِينَ, is that he should neglect during his travels visiting the graves of the righteous. And I would add to that, and this is something that when our teachers were here, we fell a little bit short, and they pointed it out to us, but we could have done this better, is that it's good to also visit the graveyards where Muslims are buried. Just in general, visiting the people of Iman, and that making dua for them. And making dua for them. And this is a way for them to benefit from your prayers. So imagine that if everywhere you go that you're going to visit the Muslim cemeteries, or at least where Muslims are buried, if they're a portion of a greater cemetery, people in the graves benefit greatly from that. And in the Khulasa, there is a beautiful prayer that I'll just point this out. And this is from Habib Ahmed and Hassan al-Attas. And he mentions that you can do this when you go to any place where Muslims are buried. He says, ثم تقرأ ما تيسر من القرآن ويهديه إلى أرواح أمواتها وأحياها. وكان سيد الحبيب أحمد حسن عطاس يحث على هذا ويقول إن ذلك حسنات تكتب في صحائف الأحياء ورحمة للأموات خير لهم من كل هدية. So he says, is that what you do? And after saying the sunnah dua, and if we're going into a place, Allahumma rzuqna hayaha wa janaha wa idhna min wabaha, Allahumma barak lana fiha, Allahumma barak lana fiha, Allahumma barak lana fiha. You're asking Allah Ta'ala for barakah wherever it is that you're going. Wa habbibna ila ahliha. Make us beloved to the people of this city or place. Wa habbib salih ahliha ilayna. And bless the righteous of this particular place to be beloved to us. And then he said, is that you recite whatever you can from the Quran, even if it's just Qul Huwallahu Ahad 3 times and the Mu'awwidhatayn. And you donate the reward for your recitation to the deceased believers in that area and the living. And one of the great Imams, Habib Ahmad Hassan al-Tass, said, is that this will be good deeds that will be put in the scrolls of the living, and a mercy for the deceased that's better for them than any gift. SubhanAllah, these little things that we can do. Things like if every time you pass by a hospital, just Al-Fatiha, Allah subhanahu yashfi man fil mustashfa ila hadrat al-Nabi. Just make a quick Fatiha. Allah Ta'ala that heal everybody that's in the hospital, and so forth and so on. And these types of things, that they're small, they take a very short period of time, and there's immense reward in them. Right? All it requires that we just be a little bit aware. So this is what he says here, is that he's mentioned specifically the graves of the righteous. And you'd be surprised, there's a lot of people that are righteous, even in these lands in which we live. You would be surprised. And the problem is we don't have a culture of recognizing who's righteous and who's not, and appreciating the righteous. Right? I only know of, not that they have to have a dome over them. There's only one dome that I know of, and that's the grave of Ba'u Muhyiddin. It's about an hour and a half from here. That there's not a culture of this. And in fact, is that when you go visit the tombs, people think that you're grave worshippers, and this is utterly ridiculous, Sani. And this has to change, where we start to appreciate the people of Allah, and that most of them are very unassuming, but it requires, we should be aware of them and visit them regularly. And the only few that people, really know of, are people like Malcolm. So that's a place that if you're ever in New York, you should take the time to go visit Malcolm, right? Benefit. And alhamdulillah, there's some others of very special people. But once this culture develops, then, maybe people will actually start to think of when they build cemeteries or they allocate places for people to be buried, about the importance of ziyarat al-qubur, of visiting the people that are deceased. You know, we hope that this will take root in these lands. So then he says, بَلْ يَتَفَقَّدُهَا فِي كُلِّ قَرَةٍ مُبَدَّةٍ وَلَا يُظْهِرْ حَاجَةً. So the next etiquette is that وَلَا يُظْهِرُ حَاجَتَهُ إِلَّا بِقَدْرِ الضُّرُورَةِ. He doesn't show the needs that he has, and except to the extent that it is needed. وَمَعَ مَنْ يَقْدِرْ عَلَى إِزَالَتِهَا. And only to the people who actually can help him with his particular need. So you get someone, you're like, oh, there's something that you need. The adab is not to let people know that you need something. And if you have family or close friends, it's perfectly fine because everybody has needs. You need to change a ticket, or you need this, or you need to work something out. Try not to let other people know that you have a need, except people that you trust that can actually really help you with that need. You know, and the nature of people is that when you show that you need something, is that they start to look down upon you and treat you differently and so forth. So that should only be done with people that you trust. Who knows? It's a human function that you have needs and so forth, and you tell them and they help you within khalas. No. And then he says, وَيُلَازِمُ فِي الطَّرِيقِ الذِّقْرَى وَقِرَاءَةُ الْقُرْآنِ بِحَيْث لَا يُسْمِعُ غَيْرَهُ. And so that you remain in a state of remembrance of Allah Ta'ala and recitation of the Quran while you're traveling. But look at this, in a way though, so that other people don't hear you reciting. This is amazing. He goes so much in detail. Now, if you're reciting things collectively, as is good to do some of the du'as of travel collectively, or to do something like the Wird al-Latif collectively, that's different. Then of course you do that out loud. But beyond that what you do with the group, if you want to still be making dhikr, that's great. But you do so, but not out loud so that people can hear you. Why? Because that creates a sense of estrangement, right? Where the key here is that they still feel like they could speak to you. And what does he say? وَإِذَا كَلَّمَهُ إِنسَانٌ فَلْيَتْرُكِ الذِّكْرَ وَيُجِبْهُ مَا دَامَ يُحَدِّثُهُ. And then if someone speaks to you, you respond back to them. And then you keep responding to them as long as they're talking to you. And if the conversation ceases, then you can go back to your dhikr. And this is the part of the etiquette. Not in the sense like, don't talk to me. Right? If you're open conversation, someone speaks to you, you engage them, you speak to them back, and so forth. Conversation ceases, you go back to your dhikr, and so forth. Beautiful etiquette. And he doesn't mention here, but it is another beautiful etiquette of travel. It's actually recommended, well, two things, to be light-hearted while you travel. And there's a hadith that says, مِزَاحُ الْمُؤْمِنِ فِي السَّفَرِ ibadah. That joking, right, being light-hearted while you travel is from worship. Right? It's actually considered to be ibadah. And that doesn't mean that you say, bad jokes that are inappropriate and stuff like that, and that you restrain yourself. But being light-hearted is good, right? Because travel is difficult, and being light-hearted helps you that get through those travels. This is why it's, some of the shuyukh, when they're in person where they're from, because of the sheer amount of people they have to deal with, there's a lot of haiba. You're in awe of them. But when you travel with them, it's very different. They are very lighthearted when they travel. It's a beautiful experience to be with them while they're traveling, because that you get to see a very different side of them while they travel. And so it's good to remain lighthearted. And then the next thing is that to travel well within your means, of course. So traveling well within your means is min karam al-rajul husn al-zad fi safar. It's from the generosity of a man to have good provision while someone travels. Okay, so if there's two different types of accommodation, one is a little bit more expensive, but it's a little bit nicer, right? When you travel, if you have the means to do so, you take the nicer accommodations. If you're on your own, then khalas, you can go the zuhud route and just go as simple as possible. When you're traveling with other people, friends or family or something like that, doesn't mean you go outside your means, but this is a good thing. Slight little upgrade in the car, so that everything's not tight for everybody and it's a little bit more room, things like that. These are all good things, obviously within your means. So then he says, فإن تبرمت نفسه بالسفر والإقامة فليخالفها فالبركة في مخالفة النفس. It happens oftentimes when we're traveling is that the travel becomes difficult and you're away from family, you're away from home, and that you're just not in the very best of states. And you could be a little bit annoyed or a little bit down or something like this. And it's very easy when you're in this state to do things you shouldn't do or not do things you should do. And what he says here is that if that your nafs doesn't want to do something it should do or does want to do something it shouldn't do, he said, فَلْيُخَالِفْهَا, go against it, right? فَالْبَرَكَةُ فِي مُخَالَفَةِ النَّفْس. The blessing is going against what the nafs wants. And that this is one of the most important points of this, right? Because this is the essence of why travel uncovers your true nature and shows your true colors. Because you're not in that normal situation where it's easy. It's not that hard in a normal situation when you come together and you're with people for an hour or two and you're going to go back. But there's all these different things that happen. And just ask people who lead Hajj groups, right? A little bit less so for Umrah, but a Hajj group, ya Allah. And so that all of these factors combine where people are away from family and they might be a little bit sick, they might be tired, they might be a little bit hungry, they might be a little bit thirsty, they might not have had their caffeine for the day, right? All these, in one of these things, when they're not traveling, right? As Sidam just talking about not getting the cup of coffee in the morning, something that you get irritable and so forth, and you would normally get irritable. What about when there's 2, 3, or 4, 5 things come together, and it's like irritable times 4 or 5? Ooh, how are we? And that's why you hear horror stories. Ya Allah, people just completely erupting on Hajj. SubhanAllah. Which is the worst possible thing that could happen. You know, that's the advice. If you're going to go to Umrah or to Hajj, is that you take a covenant with yourself, right? I am not going to get angry from now until the time I get back, no matter what. Right? You're likely going to have your patience tested. You're likely to get annoyed. And that then what happens is especially is that people become your punching bags. You start taking the group leaders and the people in service, and they might not have done anything wrong whatsoever. It could have been the hotel's fault. It could have been whoever's fault. How could that? And then you start making all these assumptions, and then people just lash out, and it gets ugly if you ask people. Like, unfortunately, it gets ugly, and especially people coming from America, right? Is that you have your critique of America, and all of a sudden you get over there and like, I'm American. That you claim it once you get over there, right? And then here you critique it. It's like, subhanAllah, ajib. And you have to choose. This, are you this or you like, right? And there's like this way we expected to be treated because we have a U.S. passport. You know that there's only so much they can do to you. And these types of things, yeah, I know we got to be really, really careful. Al-Hajj ash'ath aghbar. We're supposed to be disheveled and dirty on Hajj. And mutawadi', right? Humble. Right? And that some people, and I respect them for doing this, you know, some of people that intentionally chose not to do like the gold standard accommodations and took groups and like, we're going to stay in the tents where everyone else stays. And even those tents are significantly nicer than people's tents from before, as opposed to the deluxe tents that are very close to the Jamarat. I'm not saying that's bad. There might be a reason people have to do that. But I respect that. One, to make it easier for people to go with them, when you could actually go with group leaders and stuff. Now everything's been changed. But anyhow, is that these things are very important. So, فَالْبَرَكَةُ فِي مُخَالَفَةِ النَّفْسِ. While you're traveling and while you're at home. Blessing is in going against what your nafs wants. And then he ends this section by saying, فَلْيَكُنْ سَفَرِ الْمُرِيدِ مِنْ وَطَنِ هَوَاهُ وَمُرَادِهِ وَطَبْعِهِ حتى يعز في هذه الغربة ولا يذل فإن من اتبع هواه في سفره ذل لا محالة إما آجلا وإما آجلا. And that furthering his discussion on the same principle, he said, let the travel of the murid is the seeker, one who's trying to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let his travel be from the homeland of what he's used to, i.e. his hawa, his desire, his murad, what he wants, his taba, his nature. And so that we should travel away, and this is one of the greatest of spiritual meanings of travel, is that travel enables you in a very practical way. It's like a madrasa, if you will, to learn to go against what it is that you want. So let the travel of the murid, the one who is treading the path of the hereafter, travel away from his desire, what he wants in his that unrefined nature, so that hatta ya'izz, so he can attain true izzah, true honor, fi hadi al-ghurba, while he is in the state of being a stranger in traveling, wala yadhil, so he won't be humiliated. He says, because anyone who follows his hawa, his desires, during his travels, and really that at any time, inna Allah kataba al-hawan ala man ittaba al-hawa. Allah Ta'ala has that written humiliation upon those who, in an unbridled fashion, just follow their desires. Dhalla ma lahala. It's unescapable. Anyone that, while they're traveling and outside of travel, that just incessantly follows their desires, is that they will be humiliated. Imma ajilan wa imma ajilan. Either that in the near future or the distant future. And this is the nature of hawa. And you can't achieve anything in this world, even something that's worldly, without a type of patience. Is that how can someone become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer without patience? You can't. How can you develop a career in the corporate world without patience and move up the corporate ladder? It takes patience. And it takes discipline, and it takes hard work. And surely that you would have wanted to sleep in a little bit more, but you couldn't. Surely that you wanted to have gone and gotten a meal, but you couldn't. And so you make all of these sacrifices, and then you start to succeed in a worldly sense. And the spiritual path is no different. And this relates to how we interact with our hawa. This is a huge topic. And there's so many different verses in the Quran that if we look very carefully, it gives us a complete perspective. And so make du'as, please, one day, hoping that we can do something on that. How to understand hawa from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the nafs. So we'll move on to the second part here, and that this is now also in relation to what it is that we must know. There are certain things that we have to know for travel. And essentially, Imam al Ghazali is one of these great scholars who gives us what we need from the standpoint of aqidah, belief, from the standpoint of fiqh, of that the outward knowledge, and from the standpoint of the inward. He gives us collectively all these different things that we need. And that Ustad Yusuf, may Allah bless him, covered some of the main dispensations that we need to know. And obviously there's a lot more details. And the purpose of this is to briefly give an overview of what it is that we need. But this is something we should take the time to study outside of this weekend. Know well what it is that you need. And inshallah, that some of the specific questions that it is that you have, feel free to ask those at the wake of this retreat or sometime after, because we have to have knowledge. This is a core component of our deen, and so that we remain upon the straight path. And so the next two things we'll be looking at are how to find the qibla and how to determine the prayer times. Okay, so these are important because prayer after the shahada is the most important thing of all. And there are dispensations when you travel to shorten your prayers, but not to not pray. It's not like, okay, you're traveling, you don't have to pray dhuhr. You don't have to pray asr. And when you travel, you can shorten dhuhr. You can shorten asr. In the Hanafi school, you have to shorten dhuhr. And you have to shorten asr. What a beautiful deen. That's just such a beautiful hukm that you absolutely have to shorten and take the dispensation of Allah Ta'ala. When Allah yuhib an tu'ta rukhusuhu kama yuhib an tu'ta azaimuh. Allah loves that for people to take the dispensations that He gives, and that too, just as He loves for people to that follow the more stricter positions as well, and to do the azima. Everything has its proper place. And even though in the Shafi school there's kalam about that, is it better to shorten or not? Those are can be studied in its proper place. So the point here is that we have to have a type of knowledge when we travel. And prayer is the most important thing of all in our life. In my number one piece of advice in the beginning, and this was significantly easier in the pre-modern world, when people were not traveling on buses and in airplanes and other modes of transportation or trains, because you tended to be on some type of that riding animal, and it was fairly easy to stop and to pray. The only exception there in the pre-modern world would be traveling that on a boat, which, depending upon the size of the boat, usually was fairly easy to also then pray and to establish the daily prayers. But this is one of the things that are a little bit more difficult for us, right? Especially like the scenarios that were mentioned, is that you're on buses, and sometimes in the Muslim world that just simply don't stop, right? Or that you're on planes and so forth. You have to pray under all circumstances. And so we have to know that what it is that we can do and how we can pray. If someone's taking a bus from here to Phoenix, Arizona, or whatever, it's a long bus ride, and that you have to plan yourself out. You got to plan your travel out, and where are you going to stop? How are you going to pray? Right? Do this ahead of time. And that, again, if you can stand facing the Qibla, if not, you pray sitting down and make up your prayer. But you have to think about it and plan accordingly. And one of the things that you'll have to know after committing to prayer and realize is that the most important thing of all is your prayer. And no matter what travel that you're doing, even if it's the Hajj, if you were to miss a single prayer intentionally, it would be that significantly greater loss than anything you would ever possibly attain from that travel. So this is why, prayer, that should be the perspective. It's that important. And so the first thing we need to do is to be able to find the Qibla. So Imam al Ghazali, that in a very beautiful way, he talks about all of the different ways that we can find the Qibla. And this is a little bit different than you'll find in your traditional exposition of this in the books of fiqh, that he talks about the ways that are ardiyya, hawa'iyya, and samawiyya. So some of them relate to different geographical features of the earth, and that others relate to things like the wind, and others relate to things that are in the sky, the canopy of heaven, like stars or the like. And then he goes, so we're not going to go into his traditional exposition of this, but one of the things that I would recommend everybody does is to get a good compass. To get a good compass and to always travel with a good compass. And I would say a physical compass, get a physical compass. And also familiarize yourself with your compass on your phone. So there's probably some Android users in here as well, but I'm more familiar with the iPhone. So when it comes to the compass, I want everybody, for those who have the iPhone, open up your compass app. Go actually to settings and then go to compass. And then you'll see use true north. If you unselect that, it will be magnetic north. It's better because it'll be more accurate. And if you can be more accurate, it's good to be more accurate. You click that. So there, now it's going to give you true north. So it's going to factor in. And before these came out, what we would do is, if we were trying to be as accurate as possible, and this is less important while you travel because it's a little bit, you have a little bit more license for ease. But if you're, for instance, trying to find the Qibla in your home or a place that's going to become a masjid, it's good to put a little bit more energy in to make sure that that's the right direction. So previously, if you're going to be using a compass, you'd have to factor in magnetic north. And then you'd have to look at the various charts and to see where your geographical location is. And it could be anywhere from like 5 up to 15 plus degrees off. So meaning that like if magnetic north was, let's just say, pointing that way, true north is actually this way. You know, that's a little bit more than 5 degrees. But the point is that you'd factor that in. If you just do this, then using your compasses are good. Obviously, make sure you do the 8 motion that they suggest and so forth. But you'll find is that we'll just do a test here. Okay, everyone just pull their. I need 3 people who have iPhones. Pull your iPhones out and just point it straight to the back of the room. Okay, mine already just switched. Okay, mine reads 295 degrees northwest. What does yours read? 341 north. So that's yani 46 degrees difference. Anyone else do it? 241 southwest. Yours is way off. 251. So look, that's still 45 degrees different. Who else has got it? Look at that. So you see, we just got from 251 to 340, right? So that's why I said carry a compass, because these things are not that accurate. Huh? Yes, because sometimes we pulled these out and we're like, okay, there it is. But it's not that easy. All right, now everybody do the whole 8 motion. Let's just try this one more time. And there's not any metal here affecting this. When you're in the airports and things like that, there's metal all around you that is. Okay, so now I got 257 west. 247? 261? See? Okay, now we're close. All right. Now we're getting closer. But like, which reading is the first one? And then you start to like, so then sometimes you have to do it again just to make sure. One last time. Whoops. All right. I'm at 232. Look, see, mine changed. I'm at 230 now. What was that one else at? Anyone? See? My point is that these things are not as accurate as they seem. So this is why, and this is what I do personally. I'm not saying you have to do this, nor am I saying other ways are not valid. And I'm jumping ahead but it's the same thing. I use the app Guidance. This is my app of preference. And I tend to have both Guidance and the Adhan app, spelled ATHAN, just to double check. Because sometimes there's a difference of a minute or 2 with the prayer times. And what I like about Guidance is when it says about the Qibla, that in the bottom right, you press it and it shows you with a yellow line the direction of the Qibla. So that makes it a little bit easier because then you're not relying on the compass to give you the degrees. Okay. Now, if you want to do the degrees, that's the blessing of the Adhan app. You go to home and then you go to Qibla and it tells you, okay, so where we are now, that if you're going to be facing the Qibla, you're going to go 57 degrees off of north. Now, this way of calculating it is calculated in the way of trying to face the Ain, the actual Kaaba itself. Now, the thing is that the slightest fraction of a degree off from this distance is going to affect that. But the point is that do your best. Now, it is a valid Qibla in the United States of America to face the Jihad. It is a valid Qibla to say, okay, we are west and slightly north of Mecca. So to face southeast is a valid Qibla. Now, my personal advice there, and I don't mean to offend anyone by this, right? I grew up in California with people that faced southeast, excuse me. And if I was praying behind them, I'd pray behind them, and the prayer is valid. Because the vast majority of Qiblas in the United States of America are on northeast, I think it creates a bigger fitna to try to go about changing that. But both sides should recognize that both opinions are valid in the Shara. And it gets back to this understanding of Ayn al-Qibla and Jihat al-Qibla. That's the essence of understanding it. Now, the amazing thing is, it's only the Shafis who say outside of Mecca that you have to face the Ayn of the Qibla. And Imam al Ghazali in the Ihya, actually, he says the fatwa is given that it should be the jihah of the qibla, the general direction. So that someone who wanted to just face the general direction here, that absolutely is a valid qibla. And those that are trying to face the ayn of the qibla, because it's mutayassar and we're able to do that, that also is a valid qibla. You cannot say that that position is invalid. Both are valid. And the preference would be there to the Jam' Shamil al-Muslimin is to not cause issues on this, but both sides need to be. And that we've had people here that come to some of our programs who insist on praying southeast, and I'm totally happy to facilitate for them a place to pray southeast quietly without disrupting the Jama'ah. And if someone's adamant on that, we respect scholarly differences, and I'm happy to facilitate for them and so forth. But we need maturity when it comes to these things, just as we need maturity with the entrance of Eid and the entrance of Ramadan and then Eid. And so we need maturity with these various positions and to see all of the valid positions in the sacred law as correct. So finding the qibla, the recommendation would be is to familiarize yourself to how to do this with your phone. Okay, and now, the more difficult thing is when you travel. Now, if you have to pray on a plane domestically, and you know the plane is flying from Seattle to LA, that is going directly south. Okay, so then you have to figure out where you are and how it is that you're going to pray towards the qibla. That on that particular plane, if indeed you have to pray. If you can wait till you land, that's better. But if you absolutely have to pray, then you have to figure out the direction. The ruqsa for not facing the qibla is when you do nawafil, supererogatory prayers. For the fard, you have to face the qibla. Now, if you follow the opinion of jihad, which is recommended for travel, is that Imam al Ghazali draws diagrams in the book, and it's really beautiful. Essentially, just imagine your eyes going out like this. So you're creating a 90-degree angle, if you will, from your peripheral vision. Okay, so it's like this. Right? So this right here, if I look at it like this, it's a 90-degree angle. That's what we have, according to the opinion of jihad. And then you'll find in some schools, 180 degrees. So the only time you have to make up your prayer, that if this is the direction of qibla anywhere from here to here, that you actually prayed that direction. Then you have to make it up. So there's plenty of room when it comes to the opinion of jihad, and that's helpful. And the recommendation is anyway, if you pray on a plane, even if you pray standing, to make up your prayer. Try to pray standing. If you can't, pray sitting. And then that either way, it's better to make up your prayer. And so on planes, or if you're on a cruise or whatever, cruises are easier because you can use a compass. But planes, you have to familiarize yourself with where you are. And when you're traveling from here I tend to take Turkish Airlines, that's just my airline of choice, is that when you're traveling from here to Istanbul, you're almost directly on qibla the whole flight, for most of the flight. And then it's very simple. You just pray straight ahead. And on the way back, if you have to pray, you pray the opposite direction, and so forth and so on. So you want to just familiarize yourself with this. And Allahumma salli alayhi wa ala, I got distracted. What else was I going to say? Allahumma salli alayhi wa ala. Just lost my train of thought. So that's in terms of finding the qibla. Sorry, that's what I was going to say. So then once you reach your destination, or if you're traveling a different way, it is also good to learn how to find the qibla with the sun and with the stars. Okay, very simply, is that in the northern hemisphere, the sun at dhuhr time is facing what direction? North. In the northern hemisphere, the sun tends to be a little bit more towards the south. The further north you are, the less southern the sun is to you. Anyhow, I don't want to keep it simple. So here, if you would go out about now, and you would stand out, that you would see the sun facing, because this is northeast, the sun would be facing this direction roughly. So at Dhuhr time in the northern hemisphere, if you look at your shadow, especially like right when Dhuhr enters, it's facing north. Okay. And at Asr time, it's facing roughly in the direction of east. It's not going to be direct east, but it's going to be roughly in the direction of east, because the shadow is opposite of, so when the sun rises in the east, the shadow's to the west. When the sun sets in the west, the sun shadow is to the east. And this is why sun midday is facing north. So at Asr time, it's in the direction of east. That if you'd face that direction, it would suffice for the jihad. So that it's one of the ways of determining the qibla. If you're going to use the North Star, what's different about the North Star is that it never moves all night. So you look up at the North Star, all the other stars move around the North Star. Right? That's why they call it the Qutb. This is why the Qutb is that everything in the universe revolves around him. Right? The Qutb doesn't move. So everything else goes around it. And so that once you can look at the North Star points directly north. So if you would go out at night, you would find the North Star roughly about right there. Okay. And then since that's directly north, then that's east. Okay. And this is the way so in the morning, this is where we see the sun rising from over here. And we're 57 degrees off north. That's why we're praying this way. Okay. So once you determine where north is, then it's easy to figure out the jihad. If you're north of the Kaaba, you pray south. If you're south of the Kaaba, you pray north. If you're east of the Kaaba, you pray west. And hakada. And that's the simple way of doing it. So those are the two easiest ways. I'm not going to go into the others he mentions. Is that in the northern hemisphere, the sun points north at Dhuhr time. And then you can figure out, once you know that, where the direction of prayer is, wherever you are. And then that the North Star, once you determine that, then you position yourself accordingly. And these are the fitra ways of determining the qibla. And then finally, determining the prayer times. This is essential that you and I determine the prayer times. And again, the recommendation there would be to just download a couple apps and to check one with another. Okay, and I would recommend, again, using the 18-degree mark. Either put on Muslim World League and don't think about it, or if you do a custom setting, you want to be a little bit more technical, use 18 degrees for Fajr and 15 degrees for Isha. And I won't go into why, but that's just the recommendation. And one of the things you'll find is, like right now it says here, Maghrib is at 7:48. So if I open the other app, it says that Maghrib is at 7:48. Sometimes there's 2 minutes of difference. So the recommendation is that to wait a few minutes for each of the prayers. Right, so Dhuhr, it says it comes in at 1:02. I would wait at least 3 minutes, preferably like 5. And it takes that time anyway to call the adhan, to pray your sunnahs, and then pray. Right? Wa hakadha. And the same thing for Fajr, and the same thing for the other prayers. And so but if you're traveling in a plane, you're going to want to prepare ahead of time. And so these are things, we have tools like Halal Trip. These are good ways. You put in where you're traveling from and where you're traveling to, and it tells you roughly how long it's going to be until Fajr comes in. But then let's just say that you know that it tells you Fajr is going to come in 3 hours after takeoff, but the flight is 30 minutes late. It didn't calculate that. So you have to just know the time and then factor it in yourself. Okay, it's going to come in, and this happens all the time. If we're traveling to Umrah, and on Turkish Airlines or whatever airlines, that Fajr is going to come in very quickly if we leave at like midnight or something. And so you have to just be awake, be aware. What I recommend is, you use your earbuds or something like that, set your alarm, and know that, okay, it took off 30 minutes late. That means Fajr is going to come in about 2.5 hours or 3 hours or whatever it is. Set your alarm to make sure you wake up, or take turns with the buddy system. All right. Someone's got to take it from me. You just stay up and you wake me up, and so forth and so on. And then, or if you kind of butter up the flight attendants a little bit, sometimes they're nice, not always. but can you just please wake me up when you see Fajr come in? If you're nice to them and respectful, they tend to be helpful. I've always had good experiences on Turkish Airlines. No offense to the Egyptians in the house, the only plane I've ever been prevented from praying on is Egypt Airlines. And it might be that they just have fatwa from the Dar Iftah that you can pray sitting down. And we respect that. But I personally think that Muslim plane should, like Saudi Arabian Airlines, have a place. Take a little bit of, there should be a place for people to pray. SubhanAllah. Like, how hard is that? Right? If you can do it and then you're able to do it, which it's not that hard, right? Why wouldn't you have that, right? Anyhow, if you have a strong intention to pray for Allah, you'd be amazed. Allah Ta'ala will make it easy. Don't be rude, because that's going to confirm for some of these peoples that image of religious people, especially if you're dressed religiously. Be very kind, be very nice, be very respectful, right? And hakada. And then only in the rarest of occasions we find that people don't facilitate it for you. So determining the prayer times, get a good prayer app, familiarize yourself, plan ahead of time for your flights. Try to plan them around the prayer times, even if you have to spend a little bit more money, even if you're slightly inconvenienced in a different way, that take this into consideration and to preserve your prayer. And then in closing, before we move to the final session, he says something here that is really beautiful. And he says is that if someone's traveling and they don't learn this fiqh, are they in a state of disobedience or not? And he says is that essentially what he says is that if there's someone that can help them in their travel such that they're not required to know it themselves, then that's fine. But if not, yes, that they've fallen into a state of sin, because you can't embark upon something without having the knowledge of it. And he says, but if someone learned what they needed to learn, or that they were unable to figure something out for one reason or another, and they don't find that anyone in the road to help them, is that you have to do your best regarding. And then you make it up after. So you're on the plane, you just don't know what to do. Do your best, make sure you pray, and then make it up. And I'll just end with this story. I had this really weird situation happen, subhanAllah. I was flying from Dubai to San Francisco. And if you've ever seen that route, you fly within like 40 miles or something of the North Pole. And so we left around Fajr time. And if you know, like on the maps, on the the screens, it goes like this, where it's like the light and then the darkness and so forth. So just imagine like it's like this, right? Like the bell curve. And we were right here in the light. But because we went straight north, we flew up into the darkness. It was Fajr. We prayed Fajr, and we're on the plane. And then like 2 hours later, it was totally dark. I looked at it, I was like, what's going on? So I looked on the screen, and we'd flown up into the darkness, even though the way that this bell curve moves, it moves like this. So you think the whole flight you're going to be in light. The sabab for prayer entering is the shams. So technically what happened in like an hour and a half or whatever it was, is that Dhuhr came in, Asr came in, now Maghrib came in, and then Isha came in, and now it's pitch dark. And now the whole flight, you're in darkness, you're going near the North Pole, and then, so again, imagine here's the bell curve like this, then you're coming back down from the darkness, back into the light, around Dhuhr time of the same day. But you just had another Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha came in, and Fajr. So I didn't know what to do. But I just said, okay, it's safer to pray. So I went ahead and prayed and made up a whole day of prayers after that, because khalas, it technically came in according to what determines the prayer time. But then you come back, and then I was able to pray Dhuhr of the same day where I initially played Fajr once I arrived. And again, that requires fatwa, but it would seem to me that you'd have to pray. Anyhow. So if you're ever in that situation, I would just pray. Those are difficult flights. That was nice to have parents to help you there when you have young kids on, I think it was like 16, 17-hour flights, Ya Latif, from Dubai to San Francisco. That's one of the blessings of the East Coast. No offense to the West. I'm a West Coaster at heart, but that is one of the blessings of the East Coast. It is so much easier to get overseas unless you're going to Australia. But khair, inshallah. May Allah give us tawfiq and bless us, Ya Rahman Rahim. And give us fiqh in the deen and to open up our basa'at, Ya Allah, with hikam, that with wisdoms, and to be able to perceive what He intends for us to perceive in His creation, Ya Rahman Rahim. Allah Ta'ala give us tawfiq and bless us in all of our affairs, Ya Rahman Rahim. So we'll pause here, inshallah ta'ala. We'll let Dr. Yasser do his thing.